We are live, Evolve Conversations, episode number 20, whatever we want to call it. But I'm super grateful today to welcome Philip Mckernan from Boulder, Colorado, originally from Ireland. Thanks, Phil, for making the time today to jump on and have a bit of a chat.
Yeah, good. Really good to be here.
So I met Phil a couple of years ago. Again, I want to just make reference and thanks and gratitude to a community we're both part of, Mastermind Talks, and Jason and Candace. What they bring together is truly an incredible community of people that are of service to each other to really help through the ebbs and flows of life. And that's why I met Phil. And he's just been, even though we're separated by distance, but in regards to kind of being there next to me and Sarah, navigating us through what has been a challenging and exciting time. And really getting me to think differently and change my mindset around things. And I will never forget the day I was probably at my lowest of my lowest, and Phil took a call from me, and I was like, Phil, I can't get out of a rut. I can't pick myself up. I have a fear of failure. And he's like, Steve, you don't have a fear of failure. You have a fear of success. And what success brought me in chapter 1, and spiraling out of control. And that has kind of moved me from the deepest, darkest hole to now climbing up and climbing mountains again. So Phil, always going to be grateful for your wisdom and just being of service to everyone right now. Like you just said, you've got off a call with 500 people and just helping people share their story and be by their sides to share your wisdom. So I'm grateful for that. So how are you feeling right now? We asked this question before the call, but how are you feeling through? I feel like you're one of the better people prepared, both from homeschooling your family. You've done a bit of this before even going into the pandemic, but yeah, how are you feeling right now, and how's the family? And
yeah, family are great. We were homeschooling for the last 12 months. So we were in kind of in some regards, some type of, kind of social isolation in a way. So the family unit's great. I won't lie. I'm overwhelmed myself on occasion, but a kind of an underlying tiredness that's there, ever present. But at the same time, I posted on Facebook the other day and I said, every time I feel tired or my head starts to drop emotionally or mentally, I think I'm doing some really simple things to support myself. But I think the other thing is I'm thinking about the men and women at the front line, basically supporting other people. They're not sleeping, or if they are, they're sleeping on chairs, they're sleeping on floors, they're getting home for a couple of hours and back out again. When they rest, I'll rest. And if I can support as many people as I can through this without, killing myself doing it, because then I'm no good to serving anybody. That's my commitment. I've worked my whole life to create the body of work and dedicated my life to human behavior and performance. I'm not going to lie down and watch Netflix right now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, totally. And again, grateful for that. And what have you found to be the catalyst to help right now in regards to helping people that are going through some pretty tough times and painful times? What are some things that are working within your community? I know just holding the space and the psychological safety is super powerful in what you create. But what are some other questions or tools that are kind of helping your community and greater 1 degree, 2 degree networks?
Yeah, I think there's one thing that's just, I think one, just being honest with how you're feeling. I think a lot of us, what we do is when we get stressed, when the economy contracts, we contract ourselves within ourselves, and we isolate ourselves in a very different way that we're currently isolated in many parts of the world. The physical isolation, we kind of isolate ourselves emotionally, which, by the way, has been a huge part in the greatest pandemic the world has seen, not to be insensitive with the real carnage and pain and loss in the world. But I think one of the greatest pandemics that's hit us in modern history is just this sense of loneliness in the world, like just people just being lonely. And you can be surrounded by thousands of people, have thousands of Facebook followers, lie next to somebody every night and feel lonely in your own skin. So a lot of my work is trying to eradicate loneliness and bringing people together in some capacity to meaningful work, etc. But the one thing that I'm really pushing very hard, Steve, is as people feel a greater amplification of certain emotions, like things like worry and a sense of anxiety, while I'm trying to hold space and acknowledge that and shine a light on that, I'm also presenting to them that actually the anxiety and the worry that they're feeling today is not about today. it's actually today is triggering it, but actually it's old. An example of that is an entrepreneur who said to me last week, he said, as I get scarce and I retract into myself, I find that my decision making is contracted. Therefore, I can't see the opportunities in front of me to get out of this hole, to reinvent and create another hole to get out of. He said, I'm really repeating the same patterns that emerged in the last recession in 2008 around money and opportunity. And I said, no, you're reliving the patterns of a childhood because you don't understand your relationship to money. They were triggered in 2008 and they're being re-triggered in 2020. So a lot of the anxiety and the worry is, there's some realness today, but a lot of it is old.
And that resonates deeply with me, going through the sort of timeline therapy, and you ask questions around that, and I kind of dive deeper into that work over the last 12 months, is like looking back to my childhood to kind of see these traits which went like this, and you get to a certain point up the mountain, not quite getting there, and climbing back down. And until I went back and kind of really understood those, it's literally happened 3, 4, 5, 6 times throughout my life. So that deeply resonates with me. It's just like, how do we go back and kind of relive, bring up some memories and reshape them to move forward? So
sure.
Super powerful. Obviously you work with professional athletes, whether it's in soccer or even back in the day. And I was reading through your about page, and obviously making wine in Australia, caddying back in the day with golf. And I'm just like, you really are a caddy for people. And that really resonated with me. I don't know if it resonates with you, is that you are walking around the course of life with people, telling them which club to pick out and which distances to hit. You're not telling them what shot to do, but it's in regards to just kind of this guiding principle. Does that resonate with you? I was like, it's...
In a way, I just hope the bag that I'm caddying, by the way, for you non-golfers, is where you basically carry the bag for a golfer. Hopefully in this analogy, it's not basically me carrying all the shit for them, because I don't want to be doing that. But I think where it does resonate is that, you know, there's different types of people that are out there teaching or holding space for people. There's facilitators who are simply facilitating other people's materials, philosophies that have been around for a very long time, maybe hundreds, thousands of years. Nothing wrong with that. Then there's coaches that have a kind of a systematic approach to hopefully bettering your life. And then there's a guide. And the way I would distinguish a guide versus a coach is a coach will teach you how to play golf. A guide or a caddy, in the analogy you just presented, is they just assume you know how to play golf. You just may not have played this particular course, and they're going to support you navigating around that particular course being a metaphor for your life. So in many shots, in many cases, I'm not there telling them what shot to hit, but I'm certainly challenging them to challenge themselves on what they're capable of hitting, because a lot of us play small, we play safe. We want our hearts to be protected. We don't want to put ourselves out into the world because we're afraid of being judged. And that to me is, I think a lot of us therefore close a part of our creativity off because we're afraid to express ourselves in the world. And therefore a lot of us die with the greatest music, the greatest artists, the greatest musicians have still died with some of their greatest pieces still inside of them because they're afraid. I think all of us are afraid at some level of not being accepted and seen.
Yeah, it's powerful. And fear, like, do you know Dr. Dan Martini? Like, I got up super early this morning at 5:30, and he's talking about fear. What's your relationship, or your kind of relationship, fear and being brave? Because, and maybe we relate it back to the soccer team or performance people that you work with, having their fear mindset and how to be brave. What's that relationship to you?
I think one of the challenges with people is they want to get rid of or eradicate fear. Okay. Yeah. We want to move beyond it. And no disrespect to anybody in your network who has written the book called, you know, Kill Fear, Eradicate Fear. I'm sure there's some title out there that says that, but good luck with that. You know, that's my view of getting rid of fear. Fear is not something you can get rid of, because as you're running through life, and busyness to me is not the antidote to the anxiety that a lot of us are feeling. As we're running through life, that many of us do, and we're running away from our fears. And busy people are always running from something, Steve. They're always running from something. They're moving away from something they don't want to feel. And from my perspective, you think about you're physically running down a road away from fear. that you're trying to get away from is fear doesn't need food. It doesn't need Red Bull. It doesn't need any type of sleep. And as soon as you turn around and you eventually stop because you're exhausted, you turn around and the bastard is right behind you and it's right on top of you again. So the invitation for me around fear is to really turn around and face it and get to know fear and begin to understand not just where it lands in your life, but why it's present. Where did it actually come from? What is it trying to tell you? Is it your enemy? Is it actually really your enemy, or is it your friend? Friend or foe, you choose. But a lot of the sports people that I work with, they've got fears in certain capacities. So one guy said to me, some very talented soccer player said he's afraid of making a mistake. And I said, when? He said, at the opening game of the season. And I said, great. So I said, we're going to go for a walk. He's a goalkeeper. And I said to him, so this doesn't show up anywhere else in your life? He said, no. Just this opening game, first time it's come up. And I said, you've never had any fears of making mistakes. And we really thought about it. And then suddenly he goes, well, actually, now that I think about it, that kind of energy has permeated my entire career. I said, Grant, I said, so let's talk a bit more about it. And I said, who are you afraid to make a mistake in front of? And he goes, it's just generally. So you see, he wants to solve the problem, but he's no fucking idea where the origin is. So I said, okay, let's dig into that. Mm-hmm. It's the opening season, the opening game. Somebody hits the ball into the box. You're the goalkeeper. You're the giant. You're meant to grab it with your two hands. It's a windy, blustery day. And as soon as you jump and leap into the air to grab this ball, you know you've mistimed your jump. You just know. You jump, the ball hits the tops of your fingers. And before your face and your body hits the dirt, you hear the opposition crowd screaming because you've just dropped the ball into your own net. And as you lift your face out of the dirt and the mud, you wipe the mud off your face and you look into the crowd. You look into the audience, who is the one person on earth you don't want to see. And he just goes, oh, shit. This is my dad.
Oh.
And then I said, okay, now let's talk about failure as it relates to your father. This is not a fear thing. This is a specific relationship or lack of relationship or an energy in a relationship that he has not addressed. And he just strikes it down as fear. So fear to me in isolation is not a worry for me. We need to understand the origin of the fear, where it comes from, begin to friend it, begin to break it down and begin to understand it so we can start to integrate it into our lives. So ultimately the goal is for that fear to just loosen its grip. So it's not pulling the strings. It's not determining and pushing your life. You're actually in control.
Wow, powerful. You don't want to, and when he had that aha moment, because I'm sure it was an aha moment for him when he dissected and went back and found that single origin, that seed that was planted, that's turned into this massive tree of fear. What changed for him?
Well, let's just go a little bit further.
Yeah.
Before we go into any type of change for a second, is one, that he was able to begin to dissect why he is so fearful of making his mistake in front of his father. He then drew an additional conclusion that actually, as a young child, when you're 8 or 9 or 10 years old and you score a goal, the first thing you do is you turn to the sideline and you look at your mom or you look at your dad and you say, you don't say it as a kid, or maybe you do. Actually, I've heard kids say this. Did you see me, Dad? Did you see me? Mom, did you see me? Do I need to score another goal? Are you going to see me then? And unfortunately, in the world today, and I'm guilty of it myself, they're looking around the sidelines. They're looking at their parents. Their parents are too busy doing this. So they're not even that significant. So they grow up feeling unworthy. But they keep scoring goals. And if they get applauded by their parents, and they get seen by their parents, they get recognized by their parents, like Tiger Woods, who I believe personally never enjoyed golf until more recent times, and probably pursued golf for all of the wrong reasons, or many of the wrong reasons. And that was to make his dad happy. What we do is we end up pursuing these careers, whether it's in sport or business. And our sole goal, and even though we don't know about it, is that we're seeking validation and recognition from our parents. And there is a point in life, Steve, where as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as anybody, where you get a chance to stop and say, okay, I'm not playing this game of life or this sport for my dad anymore. I'm going to start playing this game for me. And I'm going to choose that from today. So that was his choice. I can tell you right now, he was between the first and the second goalkeeper. In other words, he wasn't necessarily the first choice.
Mm.
Am I going to sit here and tell you that one coaching conversation has changed his life and he's amazing and he can jump 5 foot higher into the air? And by the way, sign up to my 970 steps process because you can do it too. Bullshit, because everyone would smell a rat. What I'm saying is he was clearer. He was more confident. He understood the energy. He was able to dissect it. He was able to have a conversation with his father to begin to dissolve some of the energy between them.
Mm.
And what he said to me personally is it made a huge difference in his ability to be free of the worry of making a mistake and actually be more fluent, or flow, as we would call it in life.
Mm. Opening up and obviously feeling a bit vulnerable going through that process to finally be able to have that conversation with his father. And I've gone through that as well with my father over the last 12 to 18 months. You said being seen, and that resonated with me as like, and I think a lot of people watching this will resonate, is that when they're growing up, yeah, who's the first person that you turn to get validation? And 99% of the time, it's parents. Back to your isolation and loneliness, and this is something dear to me. I only worked out depression and anxiety I felt was being lonely and isolated. I just felt that I was traveling so much that I didn't have a true grounding. Are we not being seen enough? Like around validation, and you've got to validate yourself before going out. What's your relationship around like being seen and this loneliness and isolation? Because loneliness and isolation is the true pandemic. Like it's freaking ridiculous. I think it's like number 4 or 5 in the amount of people that are dying because of loneliness and isolation. Like, especially, I think the stats are ridiculous. Like over the age of 60, a male in the United States, 1 in 3 are classified lonely or isolated, and then over 75, it's 50%. How do we change this? Like, I don't know. This is a very open-ended question and a broad topic. So.
Yeah, I appreciate the easy question. I don't think there's 2 views. I don't believe in politics. I don't think politics changes the world. I think people do. So we can look at it at a political level and a societal level. And that's somebody else's job. That's not mine. Or we can look at it at a personal level. Like, why are we lonely in this world? Why have we turned our back on ourselves? Why are we doing work that's not meaningful? Why are we in relationships that don't fill us up? Why do we live in cities and towns and countries that we don't want to live in? And that is a type of cheating on ourselves or betrayal. Now, that might sound really insensitive, particularly in the current climate, because people are saying, F you, McKernan, I'm just barely holding down my job. I'd be lucky to have a job in a month or 2. So I don't mean that to sound insensitive, but the reality is that this is an opportunity to look at our lives right now and to reimagine when we come back from this pandemic, whatever that looks like. Whether it's a slow burn or whether it's a little bit more accelerated in your geographical location. Are we just going to go back to the lives we're living, or would we be happy to do that? Are we going to begin to reinvent and reimagine who we are? So being seen, visibility is something that a lot of us are very scared about. And I think the best analogy that I can think of right now is public speaking. And depending on who you talk to, and depending on some of the studies that have been done, there are studies that are out there that actually say that people have said they would prefer to be buried alive than stand on a stage. They would rather die than stand on a stage. And that the studies cite and say that public speaking is the #1 fear in humanity. Now, I think that is complete horseshit. It is completely true, and it's horseshit all at the same time, and I'll tell you why. So it's just chalked down that it's public speaking. And I never believe in, managing stress. Manage stress and do your yoga and do your meditation, do whatever it is that manages stress. But at some point, why don't you work on the stress itself, the origin? Because it takes a ton of energy to manage anything in life or to control anything in life, which, by the way, if you're a controller in the world today, you are struggling like nobody's business, because the construct that you've created in your life has been rattled to shit and back. And everything you've built called control, which is an illusion to begin with, is now getting challenged. But the reason that the #1 fear in the world, depending on whatever study you look at, is public speaking, it's not the public speaking. It's never the public speaking. It's what the public speaking represents. When I stand on stage, am I afraid of the speaking? Am I afraid of what I say? Am I afraid of the audience, how they perceive that? Ultimately, when it comes down to it, is this: I'm afraid that whatever I open my mouth and say, I'm afraid that the audience will judge me. I'm ultimately afraid that that audience will not like me. And I'm ultimately deeply insecurely afraid that that audience will not love me at some level. And it's not that I stand on stage personally as a keynote speaker for people to love me, because that would never be my goal. But I think as humans, we desperately want to be seen, yet we expect people to accept us for all of who we are. And yet we hide parts of ourselves, our vulnerabilities, our shames. Like I said something, Steve, the other day, we'll take our degrees. We'll go and do a degree in college or university, and we'll take the certificate and we'll put it in a frame. And our mothers and our fathers will put them up next to the wedding photographs as a badge of honor and pride in my son or my daughter. And yet a lot of us, I believe every single human being, has had deep trauma in their lives, starting in their childhood. And those traumas have shaped our lives more than any college degree will ever do. And the only wall they get displayed on is the wall of shame that we carry inside of us. Mm-hmm. So when you're hiding a part of who you are, you're not willing to show up in the world, you're not willing to be vulnerable. You expect people to see you and accept you for who you are. It just doesn't work. And yet that is what we need at the core, is to be seen for all of who we are and to be accepted unconditionally.
And the isolation and loneliness is, we're hiding more and more. Like, we're going internal versus external, aren't we? Like if we're general talking, like it's people going inside, and shame is becoming a bigger thing than what it has in the past, even though we're trying to get people to open up. And the buzzword of the century around vulnerability and Brene Brown. But yeah, I learned the hard way. If you're vulnerable and you're not in the right space, it can be as detrimental as anything else. So to find empathy on the other side. So what Sarah says to me is, fast empathy, slow vulnerability. And that was my big changing.
People think by ripping off their vulnerability a Band-Aid and by sharing a deep story that they haven't processed and they haven't done any work around is actually vulnerability. That's using it as a tool. Vulnerability is not a tool, it's a gift. And it should not be used as a tool to connect with other people or try to connect with yourself. It needs to be treated with a tremendous amount of caution and care and sacredness. And Sarah's 100% right.
And so we've got about 10 minutes to go. And what I really want to get out of it, and as we know, and what you've shared around the whole trauma, a majority of people have taken trauma or something that's happened or their upbringing or whatever, and it's literally repeat itself how many times throughout life. As a parent, and we're both parents, and I've got 5 kids between obviously two countries, what as parents can we do to navigate it and really hold the space so it doesn't, this generation next doesn't repeat itself? How do we get our kids to be brave and tell them about that? Like Brave Kids, I can't wait till it comes out. So
it's already in the works. I've had a vision for a kids thing years ago. I mean, the very first people I worked with before I started working with adults were kids, and I was working them for years. So I will do something in that space at some point. But the most important thing is it's a kind of a threefold thing. You're getting blinded there by the sun. There's a kind of three-prong approach. Number one, and as obnoxious as this might sound, but just bear with me before you judge me too much, is that number one, no matter what we do with our kids, no matter how good a parent or how bad a parent, we're going to F them up. Okay. And what I mean by that is that if we hug our kids to death and we never stop hugging them, they're going to be smothered. If we never hug them at all, they're going to feel abandoned. And no matter what we do in between. So what I mean by that is, it doesn't mean we should give up on our kids, but it means that we should let them go a little bit and also give ourselves a break to realize no matter what we do, they are going to be in therapy in 20 or 30 or 40 years, and they probably should be. But so what that does, it allows us not off the hook, but it allows us just to step back without this need to be perfect. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is, I disagree with a lot of parents when they say that we should protect our kids from real vulnerability, adult vulnerability. I disagree immensely. I think it's okay to allow our kids to see our vulnerabilities, like really see them within reason, of course, so they can begin to understand a few things. One is that it's okay to ask for help. Two is it's okay to be human and to be in pain. And number three is it actually helps them take their parents off their pedestal.
Yeah.
that their parents are not perfect, and therefore they don't have to pretend they're perfect. And the final thing is, there's only one way to cultivate courage in somebody, and that is allow them to see it. So the parent who goes to a shitty job for the last 10 years that they absolutely hate, and they come home and they think in their mind that when they get out of the car in the driveway and they walk into the house, that they've left their shitty job in the car next to their briefcase in the driveway. You're living, I don't know what planet you're living on, because you can't help but bring that negative energy into the home, and that negative energy from the home into the workplace. You just can't do it. To think as a soccer player, and I work with many of them, that they can show up on the pitch despite the fact that the stress is at home and be 100% down is bullshit. So to see a parent navigate and be brave about letting go of jobs that don't serve them and trying something new and trying to run a business and stepping into things and keeping going, they don't need to have a conversation with their dad in 20 years. Hey, dad, what do you think I should do? Leave this crappy job. They've seen you grow up. Or they've seen you as they grow up, being the hero, being the guy that is being brave and courageous. And it's basically showing the kids, not telling them to be brave in 20 years. It's showing them every goddamn day.
Oh, I love those 3 points. Yeah, we free range, and I'm an hour out of the city in Auckland, and letting my kids just run and be wild and potentially do things that there is some fear involved, and there could be some consequences, and they might fall over and they'll get back up. And I'm with that. I was lucky. I grew up in the Pacific Islands, literally climbing coconut trees until one fell on my head, and that's probably explains my memory loss. And then I had that moment that you shared as point number 2 is be seen. Don't put up this shield around your kids. And as I shared before this call, it was it's been tough. Obviously, I had to make a decision that was out of my control to come back to New Zealand, to be close to my kids and leave Sarah and not know when I will be back to. And my kid's very connected to Sarah as well, and Dad just burst into tears. So I just burst into tears. Everyone burst into tears, and it's probably the first time I've done it. And the sense of relief, everyone, and now to my kids to have permission to cry in front of their dad, and their dad to cry in front of their kids, like it's just taken the whole relationship to another level. Like it was just this release of incredibleness to go, wow, we're all, as you said, and it makes sense. It's like you come off this pedestal. I've always believed in sharing emotions with Lola, who's 7, coming up 8, and all that sort of thing, but I've never really cried in front of my kids. And so that point number 2 is
sorry, Steve, I didn't mean to cut across you, but imagine that in the workplace as well. Imagine creating an environment where people aren't necessarily bursting into tears every second. That's not what I'm talking about, but a real sense of vulnerability. I'm working with an organization right now, and we're bringing vulnerability into the workplace in a very unique way. And what is happening is we're literally hearing people saying, hey, John in accounting or John in sales, it doesn't matter. The poor accountants always get a hard time, but hey, I always thought you were an asshole. But now that I understand your story, I want to get to know you. I understand why you're defensive. I understand why you stay away from people. I understand why you're shy. I want to get to, because I love this guy, but now that I know his story, it is incredible.
Yeah. I want to go a little bit longer because the one last talk and bring this up, what the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years of what the work that you're doing and getting people to share their story and people to just listen and understand. We've taken some of that into organizations and getting people to celebrate. John Berghoff, I'm pretty sure you know John, and getting people to share their high points, what's happening in their workplace and outside has just been really transformational for us in the workshops that we do. Is not, as you said, work is this little box and no one brings anything from outside into it. And as soon as we started doing this, and Sarah's now head of change at NAB, and being able to have these vulnerable conversations, is this magic click starting to happen. Is like, oh, we're a human organization. We're just not another number in 35,000 people. So I can't wait to more people to open up and have one last talks in organizations and that sort of thing. And you that whole fear of public speaking, you got me on stage. So it was about a week before I finally it's been my biggest fear in my life to get up on stage and talk in front of people, because I'm like, can't remember what to say, my memory shit, literally building this whole what if scenario. And so Sarah responded to an email and said, Steve would love to get up on stage. And I didn't even know about it. And then Phil's like, you've got the fear of success of getting up there. And it was literally the 4Fs that I talked about. It was like fear. You go from this fearless state when I'm growing up of climbing coconut trees to tipping into this fearful, the other bucket is full now. You're just fearful of everything. But as you will say, is once you be able to step over that line and the forgiveness piece, wow, on stage, standing there for 30 seconds in silence and forgiving myself and forgiving others through that, comes freedom. And I know this probably share the same thing. So one last talk, what is it? The book is incredible. I'll share the links for people to get about it. And let's have a chat about one last talk for the next 5-6 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I think very basically, I think there's a little anecdotal story where the guy goes to the hospital to say goodbye to his father who's dying. And the doctor comes out and says it's time. And he says he's passing away now. And he goes, no, it'll be next day or two. But he says it's time for the conversation. And the son looks at the doctor and says, what conversation? And the doctor says, the conversation you probably should have had 10 or 15 years ago. And I feel that a lot of us are holding on to things that end up in regrets because we don't speak about them, whether it's part of our own story or the things we want to say to other people. So I wanted to create a platform and a movement that brought the conversations that we sometimes either don't want to have or don't know how to have into the world, so we can be fully seen and be fully accepted, not projected, and encourage other people to do the same thing. So it's called One Last Talk. Basically, you get 15 minutes to stand on a stage and deliver the one last talk you'll ever give. But regardless of whether you ever stand on a stage, I would obviously encourage people to go through the process of it, because it really begins to allow you to shape what is important for you as a human and really begin to understand yourself at a level that perhaps maybe you don't already, which can inform you about the future of your life. So we're bringing that into organizations. We're bringing it into, bringing it to the world digitally now, because people can come in and join it. And then we're going to be bringing one last startup to the table. We're going to be bringing one last conversation, one last book, which is how to write a memoir that matters. So there's a whole suite that we're basically building out.
And there's no better time right now than what we're going through when we're being forced to be still because we've got restrictions on where we can. We are in isolation with our families and the people that matter the most to us. So there's no better time to be able to go, let's use this time to have that one last talk with your partner, your kids. What's the first step or the framework that people can kind of even know where to start? Like if you haven't even opened the vulnerability or empathy piece and you've been such a closed book for so long, and this is a massive amount of fear for you, like what are the steps people can take to go, okay, what's this journey or quest, and how can I be guided to get to the stage of whether that's on stage or at the dinner table to have a one last talk?
I think the big question that permeates all of this is why would I bother? Like why bother going into vulnerability? Why bother digging up the past? Why bother going into it? So there's a lot of people are still at that point. And what I would offer to people like that is it's like this idea that someone says going back into your past and doing work on your childhood and stuff is hard. And I go, well, that's one perspective, but maybe it's not quite as hard as carrying a lot of the baggage that you don't even know you're carrying into your life for the rest of your life. So it's all relative. So what I would encourage people to do is to actually think about not themselves at all. I think that's the whole point, that this is not going to be hard for me. This is not my journey. This actually is this story of my one last talk, my personal narrative is about me, but it's not for me. It's actually a gift for your children. It's a gift for your boyfriend or girlfriend. It's a gift for humanity. In fact, to me, impact is a lot of people have a dream or an aspiration. They want to write a book. They want to do a speech. They want to have a conversation. And one of the things that holds us back from doing that is we are making it about us. And therefore we restrict and we get closed down. And I always say to people, if you're going to do a keynote speech, just think of one person that, and this is the best way to frame it in my personal opinion, think about one person on the 20th row who's sitting there in the same pain that you were in 11 months ago or 11 years ago, what could you say to that one person, the thing that you yourself need to hear at that time?
Yeah.
And then suddenly it's like, oh my God, I can't not do this. I can't not send this email, even though Sarah's already sent yours. Of course, Steve wants to do it. I can't not get up there. So my work was all, well, not all, a lot of it was about Philip Mckernan. How do I look good? How do I grow a business? How do I be a millionaire? How do I do this? And I switched to, if I don't, what's the cost? And my work is, it's not about Philip Mckernan anymore. I'm here as a vehicle, call me whatever, pain in the ass, mirror. I don't give a shit what people call me anymore, but I'm here to do the work so people can grow themselves and live a life where they look back and they have zero regrets, because the stats show that almost 95% of people die with serious life regrets. That's not because we're stupid. We're just afraid.
Yeah. How much do we keep inside until we're 6 foot under? And it literally helps us take us to our grave, because it's literally sitting in there like this stone that is not moving, that is deteriorating internally. And one last talk can happen multiple times, can't it? Because it's just a way of sharing a story. And I like how you framed it. It's like, it's not about you at all. It's about just giving a gift, one gift. That's it. Not 100 gifts, not 1,000 gifts, one gift to one person. And if you end up doing 2 or 3, then hey, that's the future. But the current state is like, how do I have one last talk to Lola? Not all 3 kids, just one. And that's momentum in the right way. On that, mate, I just want to, again, wrap things up and thank you so much for all the work that you're doing on the planet right now. And one last talk, I can't wait to be able to bring you down to this part of the world and have more people in Australia and New Zealand, because I feel vulnerability, we are the last couple of places on the planet, and we have this DNA built into us that it's really hard, especially as men, opening up in this part of the world. And it's kind of frowned upon. So I can't wait to bring the whole Be Brave, You Matter down this side of the world. So Phil, really appreciate for helping us on our personal journey and everything that you do. So really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Cheers, man.
Take care. Bye.